Hello, everybody, and welcome once more to the Chakra Way Meditation Podcast. And today, I can't tell you how pleased I am to have this guest on again, welcoming the beautiful Katrina Boss back to the podcast, because our first conversation was so juicy and so good. And I love this woman so much. And there was a whole big subject that we didn't get into. So Katrina is an author, and she's a tantric teacher. And one of her books, the book that we talked about last time, was Tantric Intimacy. And today, the book we're going to look at is Divine Union of the Masculine and Feminine. So I think that we can all acknowledge that there is this rather extraordinary dance between the masculine and feminine in externally, in relationship, in society, and within ourselves. And so this is what we're going to go for. So welcome, Katrina. Thank you for coming back.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. It's going to be great.
I'm so excited. I don't even know. I mean, I have a few questions, but I don't even know where to begin with this, because seems to me like such a huge subject. When we're talking about chakras and energy, I try to acknowledge that we all have masculine and feminine within us, and we try not to kind of gender that when we're talking about masculine energy and feminine energy. But we can't shy away from the fact that actually there is embodied within men and within women that energy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be gendered. We can be a very masculine energied female and vice versa. So where do we begin, Katrina? You're the expert.
Well, actually, what you just said is a really interesting place because, for example, because we've come out of this domination paradigm, which is really central to this, it seems like kind of a weird thing or maybe a negative thing to say, but we've lived in a world where separation is normal.
Mm.
And so the whole idea of the masculine and feminine is that if you imagine, we all think about oneness, spirituality, the chakras, everything. And the goal is to experience this beautiful oneness. So if you were to imagine almost the dimension of God, like the dimension of the divine, it is a oneness, it is a wholeness, it is everything, it is bliss. And then we live in duality, where we actually get to experience each other. And I get to sit on this chair and I get to eat chocolate and I get to make love and I get to interact with the things around me. This is duality. Well, how do two energies now interact with each other? They split into the opposites of masculine and feminine. Like imagine if they're one, for them to split apart, it's like a magnet. They now pull apart into a masculine and feminine dynamic. And so the masculine is attracted to the feminine receives the masculine protects the feminine. They interact with each other in a really magnetic way that draws them together. It's almost like they're always trying to come back together into oneness again. And when we experience that oneness, whether it's within ourselves, whether it's with another person, whether it's with the sunshine on our face, we experience bliss. Like we return to oneness. The problem is, so this is always how we interact in duality in masculine and feminine, always. And regardless of gender, just this energy, right? The problem is we've lived in a world of separation. And it's funny, the other day, I years ago, I read this book called Bringers of the Dawn, and it's a channeled book about the Pleiades and Pleiadians and stuff. And anyway, one of the things that I had written down in one of my books was that they said that what happened to humanity X thousand of years ago was that love was taken away from us. Right? And that is what happened to us, that love was taken away. And whether we believe it or not, it doesn't matter. It just fits well into my book. And so,
Right.
because imagine love being what connects us, that love, like actually feeling each other, is what connects us. That's what human beings were made for. That's where we thrive. That's where we are happy.
In
But
connection.
in connection, in true connection, not just side by side, not just, well, I like to cook and they like to clean, so we really work well together, but actually in intimacy together, right? It's the same thing like we were talking about children before we came on the podcast. And there is such a difference between I am the parent and you're going to do as you're told, and as opposed to actually seeing the child as this absolute multidimensional gift that you get to hang out with, that you get to actually have a heart connection with. That is an entirely different merging of souls. Like that's an entirely different thing. So in this weird world, and again, how it happened, I have no idea, but there was even a book called out there once, and he talked about, was it the Dominator virus or something like that, that something got into people where suddenly not only were we separated, I had to be in control. And so now all of a sudden, this masculine and feminine dynamic still exists because we're in duality. But what happens when we're in separation? Well, now suddenly that beautiful protector of the vulnerable, say, for example, a parent and a child, suddenly becomes controlling. I need to force you to do something so that there's this minimization of the feminine, whatever that is, a child, a woman, a student, an employee, whatever, and I'm going to control you. But there's no feeling, there's no love, there's no connection, but the dynamic is the same. In the dynamic of giving and receiving, suddenly it's like, here's what you need to hear, whether I'm giving advice or I'm giving you whatever, right? I'm giving you help. I'm going to help you. There's strings attached, of course, and you're going to pay me back dearly in the future and as to how I want it to be. So, of course, what happens when we have all these dynamics, we start to feel very separate,
Mm.
almost to protect ourselves. We don't even we don't want to step into even healthy masculine because all we've experienced is this dominating masculine. We're terrified to actually be in healthy feminine because all we've ever done has been controlled or
Mm.
manipulated or treated like an object. So, the foundation of all of this work, which is why I think this is really important and current right now, is because we are waking up
Yeah.
and we want to feel connected. We want to have a real loving relationship. And as soon as someone comes in with fight or toxic habits, I don't even want to say toxic masculinity or femininity, but toxic habits of separation, of domination,
Yeah.
there's this something in us that's saying, no, I don't want to play that game anymore. You're going
Mm.
to have to go it's sort of like that Monty Python skit where someone comes in and they start arguing and he goes, "Oh, you're in the wrong room. Arguments are down the room, down the hall." And that's what it's like, because it's like once you get it, it's like, no, I actually only want to connect with you. Well, I'm just sick and tired. It's like, well, you know what? I don't know what's in you right now, but you probably just need to kind of, because I don't desire this. So now all of a sudden, we want to interact with each other, but it's new. Like, how do we actually interact in a loving way, connected? And this is where, unfortunately, there's sort of this leftover from the old world where if we think someone is masculine, sometimes they truly are healthy masculine, that they love helping, they love giving, they love being a protector, they love caring for others. They're literally great at husbandry, whether that's husbandry of property, children, society, community, whatever, a partner, whatever. That's true masculine. But because of this, we think masculine is, I'm always in control, I'm really strong, I'm always in the power seat, I'm this, both genders.
Mm.
So a lot of people, I might say, well, do you want to be in the masculine or the feminine in an intimate relationship? Like, what's your preference? Because that's really important. It's like, oh no, I'm always in the masculine. It's like, do you mean you're always giving and caring for and protecting? Or do you mean you're always in charge and in control? Because
Mm.
that comes from the separation thing,
Yeah.
right? In the same way as if I say, do you want to be in the feminine? Oh, yeah, I love being in the feminine. I love wearing long dresses and I love just, people just doing everything for me. And it's like, no, that's not feminine. That's the feminine stereotype of what a woman needs to be to serve the man, right? That's kind of the prostitute archetype to the tyrant king, you
Mm.
know, and we sort of have this idea that this is masculine and feminine. And that's why it's so important to be um to really redefine these things because
Yeah.
we only understand them in separation.
So I want you to now, because I think we all, I mean, I don't think there's anybody listening or watching who could say that they can't define what is a toxic masculine or a toxic feminine archetype, if you like. What I would love for you to do is to kind of define what the ideal or what the truest form of masculine energy is and of feminine energy, because I think you're right. I mean, if you think about, what's the masculine energy, we think, provider, protector, strong, whatever. And feminine, you think nurturing, caring, receiving. But even that is sort of, I don't know if that's very base. So I want you to ask you if you can give me uh, what that looks like in its healthiest way. And it doesn't mean necessarily within relationships, but also, I mean, but it's all relationship, isn't it? Whether you're an employer or a child, of a parent or a partner or a friend or colleague, whatever it is you are to somebody of the opposite sex. And also we have to take into consideration the fact that gender is no longer is no longer binary. There is a big spectrum of gender that we can now look at as well. And I think that's super confusing because
Well, the
because it
beautiful thing is it's not confusing in this.
no,
I
okay.
think it's confusing as we sort of bust out of a lot of gender stereotypes that say boys do this, girls do this, like all that kind of stuff, right? But so I want to start with what you mentioned about how the masculine is providing and strong and all that kind of thing, and the feminine is nurturing and loving and all that. And what's really interesting about that is part of that is still correct, and part of it is actually just part of our society. So historically, a family unit was a father, a mother, children, the farm, whatever that was. That was sort of the ideal. If the mother and father were healthy, right? If they were, for some wonderful blessing, they were healthy, happy, actualized, mature people, the man of the family. And again, I never really got this until I was married, because before that, I studied mathematics at school. I lived kind of in a man's world. I was a computer programmer. Like I was kind of different for a woman, right? I didn't
Mhm.
do the typical women things,
Yeah,
which today in 2024 sounds crazy, but 35 years ago, that was really significant,
yeah, absolutely.
right? But then I married a farmer and I moved to the middle of nowhere and I lived on a dairy farm. And suddenly the interesting gender split of roles on the in the family made so much sense, especially once I had children.
Yeah,
Up until then, I was a computer programmer, so we just both worked, we both did everything. It was no big deal. But once I had babies on the farm, I'm recovering from childbirth, I'm breastfeeding, I've got toddlers, they can't be out with the animals, they can't be out with the machinery. Suddenly, this gender split of chores made 100% sense why the woman was in the home with the children and the man was out providing and doing the thing. And in the land of funny soul journeys, wow, that was a massive comeuppance, right? Because I would have thought like women can do everything. And then after 10 years of being a farmer, it's like, you know what? Screw that. I don't want to do everything. I don't need to prove myself anymore. So what happened there is like if you have a healthy, and I'm just going to use that heteronormative model because it is in our heads, we consider the feminine as being nurturing, caring, loving, the masculine being providing, strong, protecting, right? But what's interesting is everything we just said there is masculine, right? Because what's happening is what we have are two heads in different areas. We have, say, the mother in the home caring for the children. Because the important thing is that masculine and feminine are halves of a whole. They don't stand alone. All by ourselves, we are both. All by ourselves, we are the yin yang symbol, right? I am fully masculine, fully feminine all the time until I come into contact with someone else. Then we polarize. But then I come back to me. So if I'm being a mom or a dad and I'm with children, We polarize, and I am now in the masculine, they are now in the feminine, right? I am caring for them. I am giving for them, giving to them.
Mm.
I am protecting them, right? In the same way.
Yeah.
The father, he's out and he's taking care of the cows and he's doing the thing and he's planting the, and he's out there and he's in the masculine, he's in the feminine. Where the masculine and feminine gets really interesting, where it does split sometimes by gender, but it does split by preference, is in the intimate relationship between the mother and father, right? And what's interesting about this, whether it's a same-sex couple or whether it's another combination of genders, if you want to have a romantic, dynamic relationship, if a lot of marriages are really just friends with benefits, like that's really, they're kind of side by each, hanging out, watching Netflix, having a bit of sex, going to Cuba, right? There's really no interaction. There's no magnetic something happening between them, right? But if you want this, regardless of genders, one person will be strengthened by being in the masculine energy, and one person will be strengthened by taking the feminine journey of surrender, receiving, appreciation, all that kind of thing. If we don't have that, and it's not 100%, but it's interesting to see, where are you in that? Like, so for me on that continuum, I love in intimate relationships. In the rest of my life, I am so masculine. I am always the one writing the books, planning the events, teaching. I'm always in the masculine and I
Yeah.
dig it. But in intimate relationships, I'm about 90% in the feminine. Like, I like to be in the feminine about 90%. And luckily, my partner loves to be in the masculine about 90%. So we have this beautiful flow that every so often I go into the masculine and go, all right, you know what? You just go lay there because I've got some ideas. Right? But it's all about this connection. And so, say in intimacy, when the masculine, if we take the masculine partner and the feminine partner, what's the ideal? The masculine partner loves to woo the feminine partner, and it never ends. As long as you desire this magnetism, the masculine partner's like bringing home flowers, taking them out for dinner, planning events, doing this, want to do this one. And why, how are they doing it? They're reading the feminine. And it's sort of like that. All I want to do is make you smile.
Mm.
That, it just lights me up. When they say initiate intimacy and they start to, it's so funny. A friend of mine, Sherry Winston, wrote this amazing book called Anatomy of, what's it called? Anatomy of Female Arousal or something. It's not exactly like that, but it's something like that. And she considers men and women, and this is still back in the heteronormative days, but, she considers it like pussies and puppies. And she basically said that the masculine is kind of like the puppy, like, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And the feminine is like a cat, let's just say, and kind of like, not just right now. And this is this constant, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. This
Yeah.
is the masculine and feminine. And eventually all of a sudden it works,
Yeah.
right? That is wonderful.
Mm.
And that's what makes the relationship so joyful. And on the feminine side, it it isn't, in our old words, like, it's not just lying there.
Yeah.
When the masculine actually like caresses the feminine and um woos the feminine, everything, the feminine person, whatever body, I have male friends who embody this beautifully in relationships as well, that when we are caressed, when we are treated like that, it's like our energy expands. It expands into this like multi-dimensional landscape of pleasure,
Mm.
right? And then all of a sudden, this energy continues to play, and then you play together, and it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's appreciation and there's feedback, and the energy starts to flow, but it's all in connection, right? So it's not like, how can I be super feminine on my own, or how can this person be super masculine? It's all about, how do we interact together? That's
Yeah.
all, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I mean, it's this amazing dance between these energies that I think, because, and that I feel like society has had such a big part to play in this as well. We the P word, the patriarchy and this very masculine energy world that we have been living in for the last few decades, if not centuries, actually, where the masculine traits of growth and success and creation and more profitability and forging ahead and attainment and things and status and regardless of whether you're a man or a woman or whatever, that's still the goal, to have the smart car and the nice holiday on the whatever. This is a very masculine energy of wanting and this growth. I'm writing an article at the moment about burnout, and I'm thinking about the ridiculous way that society and companies and businesses are created. It's like, no, we want our growth chart to look like that. We want it to go sky high, and it's unrealistic, and everybody's got to just, aim for these are our targets, and they're completely unattainable, but we are hitting, if you hit them, then you're going to get all the yachts and motorbikes or whatever it is, that turn you on. And we are pushed to think that that is what success looks like, in this very masculine guise of attainment, more stuff.
Totally. Well, it's always funny, like every so often, because like I've been self-employed for a long time, and there's people that are like, and we can help you make 7 figures a year. And one time someone actually said that to me, like, I don't know what, maybe I bit and I started messaging with somebody who said they had some great program or something. And they're like, and we can do this. And I was like, I don't have a cocaine addiction. What in the world do I need that much money for? Like, it's the weirdest thing. Like, it's actually like some level of mental illness to think that you need all this money. Like, imagine if it was apples and you just filled your house with apples that you could never eat. Like, people would say they're crazy. They would call you a hoarder.
Seriously, they've gone the apple lady. But
Right?
you're so right. You're so right. There's only so much that we actually need. But we have been fed this dream that the more is better, bigger is better, faster, higher, taller, stronger, whatever. The bigger your muscles, the bigger your tits, the bigger your ass, the more money, the bigger the yacht. It's a really bizarre, but it's, for me, I see that as a very masculine driven desire. Or is it? What do you think?
I see it as the disconnected, like tyrant king issue.
Yeah.
Right? So there are certain archetypes that we fall into in the masculine feminine in separation and even in relationships. So for example, that like and I actually believe that the world's very strange. Like, you know how they talk about there's that 1% that rules everything or whatever, who basically have like 99% of the wealth in the world. Like it's 100% hoarded by these. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder whether the earth, this is a complete off topic thing, but I also often wonder if the world is actually inhabited by beings from all kinds of galaxies. We all just show up on Earth as earthlings. Like this is sort
Yeah.
of the only way we show up. And if the 1% are actually like Ferengis from Star Trek,
I think
that the Ferengis, they just, all they care about is shiny things and money. And so but they look human, but they're actually Ferengis, but we don't know that because we're not on Star Trek. And
I think it's a very real possibility. I mean, but the thing is that I also want to just carry out what I've just said. It's like in the, this is masculine thing. It's a masculine energy. I'm not blaming the men
but I
because,
don't think it's masculine. I
oh,
think it's
yeah.
this, I think it's this disconnected king elite royalty thing. It's
Mm,
just simply, it's actually filling a wound. It's filling a void inside of someone. Because true masculine energy is loving and
mm,
caring and protective
yeah,
and
yes,
giving. This energy is not giving, it's not protective, it's parasitic.
yeah.
So it's actually taking.
Mm,
It's not masculine at all. It's actually very dysfunctional feminine. Is if a feminine receives, right? Well, I receive what you give me. If I try to go out and take from you, right? It's not anything. It's just kind of sick parasitic behavior. Like it's not anything. And I don't even, so it's in this dysfunction, but it's just like, I am tyrant king and I will continue to draw from you.
Yeah.
But it's not masculine, but we've been raised in a society. And because that energy was the power, they were the ones in power.
Mm.
We think that's the other side of the dynamic, that sort of being beaten down
Yeah.
is it's the same thing as sometimes we attribute being angry and being violent as being masculine, right? It's sort of up there with the warrior energy, right? So, oh yeah, they're so violent and they're so powerful and they're so angry all the time, they're just so masculine. It's like, it's like all the fighting boxing matches and stuff, right? Who's the
Yeah.
toughest? And it's like, this isn't masculine. It's just fighting. It's pure dysfunction. If the goal is health and wholeness, like you imagine even this weird pulling away, this pulling of all the money into this tiny little pot, it throws the whole world out of balance.
Yeah. Of course.
It creates poverty, it creates scarcity, it does nothing. So imagine even within ourselves, in the land of what you're talking about in burnout, when that exists within us, inside of us, because we have this idea that we want way more than we'd ever need, right? Way more success, way more whatever, way more fitness, way more friends, way more popularity, way more success, way more social credit. We literally go in and we rape our own feminine. Like we literally just draw from our own stores, and we draw out of all of our adrenal energy. We draw everything out of our bones until there's nothing left. And inside we crumble. And that's what this energy does in the world, right? It eventually, and that's what we're seeing in the world,
Yeah.
right? The world is saying, okay, this actually has hit a critical mass. Now it all has to change, which is exactly what happens when we have burnout.
Mm.
All of a sudden we have to look at everything and say, hold on a minute, this is absolutely dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Like we actually have to come back into balance and start to even to recognize, like in burnout, to recognize that our feminine, which is who we really are, the feminine is our bodies, our minds, not our minds, our bodies, our emotions, our truth. Like if you imagine in the Hindu philosophy, there's like Shiva Shakti, and Shiva Shakti is the oneness. And in order to manifest on earth, to create duality, Shakti descended into physical form and Shiva remained as consciousness.
Yeah.
So all of us are Shakti energy, right? And so
Right.
we live in this wonderful dance between consciousness and Shakti. But when our consciousness sort of gets hijacked by this weird idea that more is better, regardless of Shakti, it just keeps drawing out Shakti until Shakti's like shriveled up and gone.
Yeah.
Well, then so's Shiva gone.
Yeah.
Like everything dies. And when we actually realize that when we access us, we access our emotions, we're accessing our truth, and that there's wisdom there. Like, because this is one of the big problems with the patriarchy. And again, it's not about the men, but about this energy of domination from the top. Everything feminine was poo-pooed. Everything feminine was unimportant,
Yeah.
nonsense, dangerous, all
Yeah.
that, empty, right?
Mm.
The idea that women and children were just kind of tabula rasa. They were
Yeah.
just like blank slates for us to mold. We have to mold our children. It's like, no, our children are already, they are fully fledged acorns growing into their own tree, you know? And it's a huge thing for even for ourselves to look into ourselves and say, there is so much wisdom in my emotions, and when I listen to that and my masculine acts upon that, I become happy.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how much money I have, and it doesn't matter how many yachts I have. I'm actually happy, where those people will never find that happiness.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a massive rant. Like,
No, it's a good rant. It's a good rant, and it's brought up a million questions, half of which I've forgotten already. But one of the things that I wanted to address there is take it back to this societal thing where men, and to bring it back to this actual gender divide between men and women and where we sit within society. And women, very clearly historically, suffragettes and etc., being recognized as people with opinions as women has suppressed the feminine energy, has suppressed the qualities of femininity. And this, you're talking about the qualities of femininity, being able to be in touch with our emotions and to being caring and nurturing and empathetic and so on. These are all beautiful, heartfelt, and being and creative as well. All of these are the qualities that live in the sacral chakra and in the heart chakra. And then the third one that's very feminine is the third eye, which is intuition and knowing. And that's all the old poor witches who just use their intuition and plant medicine and pay the consequences. So all of these aspects of femininity have been crushed down, squished, and been told within a broader societal way that they're really not important. And in fact, they're slightly annoying. Like, your emotions are annoying. I don't want to know about them. Your intuition is spooky. Just go and jump in the lake. And your compassion and yes, we need a little bit of compassion, but you can go and be a nurse if you want to be compassionate. Society has created this sensation of almost it being shameful to be feminine. So the majority of men, and I've used that word, majority slightly loosely, in that it's more or less, I don't know, have had the femininity squished out of them like a pot. No, you don't be emotional. That's silly. And no, leave it to the girls to be doing the caring thing. And no, we're not going to trust our intuition. We're going to trust the numbers, the graphs, the pieces of paper that we have that say something, the science. Nothing wrong with science, but that's our what we're going to follow, not our intuition. And I feel like we're all paying the price for that, men and women. And I think that and you're talking about this awakening that I feel that that a lot of people feel is happening now in terms of energy and so on. And there's a lot of men out there who are like, hold on, I've just been sold a lie. I've been living my life in a way that has not made me happy, has not made me fulfilled. I'm just miserable, burnt out, and kind of flailing a little bit. And guess what? I've got all these trapped emotions that I've never expressed. So yeah, I just have a heart attack and keel over on the golf course or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I have this thing with men. I think that there is an issue around men not being able to necessarily process love, not being comfortable receiving love, not being able to necessarily give love in a feminine way, because they've shut all that down. And they certainly don't love themselves. These three fundamental facets of love have been shamed out of a lot of the men of society. You've got to be a big boy, the big man. Don't be a sissy. Don't show your emotions. God forbid you cry. It's terrifying.
Totally. Well, and what's one of the big challenges with this time, which is why, like, even learning anything to do with this, learning how to interact, learning how to be loving, learning the masculine and feminine, we really have to walk gently forward, like almost with baby steps. Because if you are a man, you were hit with the patriarchy because you were part of that side. So you almost had to be like that tyrant king. You almost had to be like that. No emotions, no this. You had to provide no matter what. You had to work a million hours no matter what. You had to, I mean, today, obviously, all genders do that. But,
Yes.
and you weren't allowed to you weren't allowed to do anything. You weren't allowed to be human. Like you literally had to be like a robot.
Yeah.
And the women, and again, we'll just speak in this historically, women were often so beaten down by the patriarchy, they have no healthy masculine. right?
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, is like, and the truth is nobody has any healthy masculine or healthy feminine, but at least the men are kind of like, well, as long as I make enough money to provide for the family, I'm okay, right? Or as long as I stand up for you at the bar, I'm okay, right? And the women, some are good at receiving, some are good at being, appreciative. Like some are good at that. But most of the time, so for example, when I run women's retreats, ironically, I spend most of the time teaching them how to have healthy masculine within.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
in order, again, these are all connected. So if I want to be able to access my deeply vulnerable state, then I have to have a strong protector, because it's the protector and vulnerable. If I'm always throwing myself to the wolves, I'm just going to keep getting hurt, right? So I have to actually, if my protector is only this big, I can actually only be this vulnerable. So
Yes.
if I want to start accessing my emotions and being honest with myself, I have to start promising myself that I'm going to show up and I'm going to say no. And I'm going to, and then I actually have to do that. Like these are huge masculine traits. Showing up, knowing that I can trust you, knowing I can depend on you inside. And then, okay, I can open a bit more.
Yeah.
And then I can open a bit more. Or sometimes I open a lot and inside I rise to that masculine. And inside I have to be able to do that. And in the same way, for a lot of men, they have to do the same thing. Because the reality is their healthy masculine is only as big as their healthy feminine, right? And if they can only access this much of their inner truth and their actual, then that's actually all the healthy masculine they have. But every time maybe they sit down with a partner or a friend and they actually share a little bit more, their masculine will rise to protect them. Or maybe they're like, you know what? I don't care what people think. I'm allowed to cry. I'm allowed to have feelings. I'm allowed to have had a shitty childhood. So my masculine just rose. All right, now I can feel more. So
Yeah.
it's very often that we have to strengthen the opposite so that we can actually come into our healthy masculine or feminine.
So how this work, like how I completely agree with you. Absolutely. But what is the work to get us there? Is it simple awareness? Is it simple learning? Is it somatic work? What is it that gets us to that place where we can shift out of what our known, learnt, taught dynamic is with our masculine, feminine, and step into something that's more healthy, step into something that's new, and let go of the stuff that's been holding us back because it's scary, because, I don't know, ridicule or shame or guilt or whatever has been keeping us in that loop that we're in. How do we actually literally go about shedding that and moving onwards and upwards?
Yeah. It's funny. Someone in one of my classes recently, we were talking about what Tantra is. Like, what
Mm,
is the journey of Tantra, right? People are like, well, I want to sign up and I want to start, it's like, how do I start? That kind of idea. But the reality is how we got to where we are today is kind of like a million paper cuts. And we had one paper cut and we adapted, another paper cut and we adapted. And
yeah.
it's very complex and interesting.
Oh, so complex. And everybody's story is completely different. Everybody's pattern and history and oh yeah.
Right. And so this is where Tantra, and this is where the masculine feminine, I believe, fits within the Tantric worldview, because the goal is this beautiful connection with all things, like, which is really what Tantra is, to understand that we really are fully divine, fully physical beings, everything here, right? And so it really still does come down to some level of connection within to our own highest wisdom, our own divine guidance, whatever that is, that something inside says, okay, you know what? I want to heal this masculine feminine thing. Like we actually put it out to the universe,
In those words, literally. Yeah.
right? And then there's a balance between sometimes we need to have a different philosophy. Like we actually need to have some truth, because if what we understand about the masculine feminine is control, submissiveness, all this kind of thing, well, we're
Mm,
never going to get there. So then maybe we read a book or we
yeah.
take a course, we do something that actually redefines it in a way that rings true.
Yeah, it has
like
to
in a
resonate.
way that is enlightening for us.
Mm-hmm.
But then we go out in the world and all of a sudden we'll have an experience with someone and we'll go, oh, I see this now. And then we just, and maybe we open it up and we say, okay, I'm reading this weird book about the masculine and feminine. And here's what I'm kind of seeing. And you kind of talk about it, or you don't talk about it because you're in a big fight and they're like freaking out. And then you go back. I used to have this calculus professor in university, and then he would give us these brutal questions, and we'd all be sitting there like, oh my God. And he would sit there and he would put his hands in prayer pose, which is was hilarious like 35 years ago. And he'd sit there and he'd say, take this to your place of contemplation and meditate upon it. It's like so funny. And that's what we have to do. We have to step back and be able to observe what just happened and say, oh, and then we start to see these mad patterns, right? These like huge patterns of 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 being always needing to be in control or
Yes.
never trusting people or whatever. And it's not just, and the great thing about this is it will exist in every single aspect of our life.
Yeah.
Right? And let's say even in intimacy, when we study this within our intimate relationship, this is where we are so vulnerable. Like we are literally, our underbellies are hopefully exposed. So it's almost like it's so sensitive. And hopefully this person we're with also desires a deeper connection. And all of a sudden we start to realize, like, so for an example, like I have been teaching masculine and feminine for 10, 12 years. I don't know when I first started, this really started to gel for me. And in my current relationship, he came in like 2 years ago, absolutely wanting to be in the masculine. That's like, he actually, like, that's when I was dating, right? Because I was married for 20 years, then I was single. And I was really happy. Like, I was really quite balanced in myself. But if I was going to be in a relationship, I really wanted to play in this dynamic. I really wanted to have romance. I wanted someone who would want to be in the masculine as much as I wanted to be in the feminine. Dun, 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 he appears. And so he comes in, and, there was a lot of dancing in the beginning, trying to sort it all out. But in the end, what I found was he is so good to me. He is so He has so much beautiful masculine energy. I've realized that being in relationship with him has actually healed my own inner masculine. And I now treat myself better because my inner masculine actually has been quite a commandant. Like, I'm your burnout girl, right? Like, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and I made a plan, and here's what we're going to do, and we're going to work the plan, and we're going to, da 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 da. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I have someone in my life who's actually healthy masculine. And I'm like, I literally in my mind have to say every so often, if I feel myself going down the burnout road, I'm like, okay, what would he do? He would draw me a bath and make me a cup of tea. And that's what my inner balance becomes, right? So there's something really interesting. And again, even in the feminine, there's something really powerful in the feminine. I mean, there's a lot we can talk in the land of intimate relationships, but the idea of receiving, again, in a patriarchal society, in a tyrant king kind of thing, the receiving's just greedy
Yeah.
and needy
Mm.
and whatever. But the reality is that in an intimate relationship, let's say this person shows up, you know, and this other person sees them, loves them, and receives every part of who they are. There's nothing like being seen like that.
Mm.
Like to actually receive someone, whether it's into your body, whether it's in your life, to receive their joke and actually laugh at it or roll your eyes like you should if it's a dad joke, right? But to actually fully receive,
Yeah.
that is, the other person just lights up like crazy that you love me this much. You think I'm funny? This is a thing. And then, and it's a very gentle process. But then once that happens, it's like a ripple effect into everything, into your life. Like it just, we shift, we see it in one dynamic. Like if our masculine becomes more healthy in a relationship, or like even in parenting or something like that, it like ripples out into every single masculine relationship we have.
Yeah.
It just, it's like, say, for example, if we struggle with our feminine, one of the really fun aspects of the feminine is chaos and our wildness, right? And within every one of us, we have a true chaotic nature. And we also have the stability of the masculine, like the structure, the order. And these two things balance each other. Like these two things feed on each other, right? And so, like, let's say, so my partner, I can be like, oh, I've got this new idea. And then, you know what? I'm going to start doing animal flow because I love animal flow. And, blah, blah. And he's so funny because he's always kind of like, he's this guy and I'm like this. And he's like, okay,
Okay, then.
okay, yeah, all right, we can plan around that. Okay. But he digs it.
Yeah.
Like he digs the chaos. It's kind of like, okay, I've created this and I'm going to color it in now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's there's a thrill. But anyway, so if we want to access our feminine,
Mm.
we have to start trusting chaos. We have to start trusting intuitive calls. We have to start trusting our own innate wildness, which isn't like wild. It's just authentic, like an animal in nature.
Yeah.
How would it act?
Our truth, our authenticity, even. I mean, oh, sorry, being able to receive love is another massive thing. I think for the masculine energy in all of us, being able to receive love, being able to give love and to give self-love, but to receive love, that's a hard thing, I think, for quite a lot of people, because that comes down to self-worth. Oh, am I really worthy of receiving the love? And am I really good enough? I don't deserve it. Or they push it away, the insecurities and the past things come up, and like letting go to actually receive love. It's all surrender, isn't it? In this surrender to the chaos, this surrender to the wild, to the authenticity, because we're so buttoned up. I mean, maybe I'm just speaking as a British person, but I think I'm speaking as kind of Western civilization really as well. Not for, but about. It's quite hard to lay back and just allow that chaos, allow the waves to just wash over you, and for it to just go with the flow, if you like, which is again a very sacral energy, that female goddess energy.
I wonder too if, like, to your point earlier, that some of these sort of masculine structures really get in the way, like the idea of the linear ladder of life, right? That you're always having to improve,
Yeah.
right? And again, there's really good times for ladders and spreadsheets and profits and all that. Like there's a good time
Yeah.
for that, but there
Yeah.
has to be the balance of this. And the
Mm.
problem with this kind of ladder of life that you always can improve, what that means is there's actually something wrong with you right now,
Yes.
all the time. So, well, you don't really love me because there's all these things I'm working on. But, once I get fit and once I get this and once I do that and once I have money, then maybe I'm worthy of asking for your love. But until then, like, let me climb the ladder a few rungs. Like this idea that there's a ladder to climb,
Yes.
like that's a problem in
That
our psyche.
absolutely. And I think that completely resonates. That absolutely resonates. And that's why people find it hard. And I think that's probably why men find receiving love. I mean, no, I'm not going to say just men. I think all people find it hard to receive love. No, you don't love me because my tummy's still a bit too fat, or I'm whatever the reason is. There's a million different excuses that we've all got. You're
Or I'm
absolutely
too short, or I'm too tall, or I'm too whatever, like all these bizarre.
things that we can't actually change.
Well,
Yeah.
and the other thing is about love, like, so I don't know if I've told you this before, but in 1999, I was sick and I had these breast lumps. And this was this huge turning point in my life. And it was the story of my book, What If You Could Skip the Cancer? And my teacher at that time, who appeared serendipitously, he defined love as connection. So love is actually just simply how human beings connect. So for a lot of people, and especially men, but women too, because we've lived in this world because the world is, I have another book that I've been writing, and I don't know when it's going to come out, but it's called Healing from a Sociopathic World. And because that's really this very strange, loveless world we've been raised in. And it's not that we haven't had little bits of it every so often from lovely people, but as a system, it's a very harsh place that we've lived in. And so what has happened is inside of us, we've had to put up walls of protection,
Yeah.
right? Walls of protection disconnect us from people. And it doesn't even matter who they are. It could be a wall of protection from our parents
Mhm.
to our children, to our friends, to our colleagues, and especially to our lovers. Because the hardest thing is some people are really mean and they're very unkind and they're very unthinking. Like I've known men who struggle with various sexual dysfunctions, and they can go back in time and find a time when something happened in intimacy and their partner laughed at them, or they made fun of them, or they did something. Like you think of, even as a society, how cruel they are, like making fun of like small penis jokes, things like that. Like I think those are like the height. It's no different than making fun of fat women or
Mm.
whatever. It's like, okay, hold on a minute. Like this is so ridiculous. Like it has nothing to do with the person.
Yeah.
Whether someone is thin or heavy or small or big or muscly or not, it has nothing to do with the soul inside. But we have been inundated with this, like just inundated with it. So how many women specifically, but men have this too, like, oh, well, you couldn't, like you said, you can't love me because look at my body.
Yeah.
My boobs are too big, my penis is too small, my belly's too big, my shoulders are too skinny, whatever. And it's like everyone, so we have these little walls up.
Hmm.
But it's like, I know that at some point, like even if you say you love me or you say you're attracted to me, you're just saying it because you want to get lucky.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to be honest. So we have this little wall up, right? And I think a lot of men are terrified of doing the wrong thing, terrified of rejection, terrified of, because they've been super judged in ways that women have been judged too, but it's slightly different.
Yeah, because not only have they been judged, but they've been judged in terms of their ability to succeed in this so-called hierarchy, like how far up the ladder they've got. And that's the big thing that they have to, they have to prove that, I've got I've got the success, I've got the big house, or I've got the whatever, and yeah, it's a way more daunting, or it's just as terrifying. And I think, this is not just a problem that men face. I think, women now face it as well, because, having been through this sort of equality, and now we all have exactly the same pressures. And so actually it's becoming, maybe this is the sort of the cycle of the pendulum swings, where, it was grossly unfair. Now we're coming back to it being much more equal, but we're now sharing all of the same issues. So it's not just exclusively men who burn out, but women will burn out as well. Lucky them, but we all have the same issues to be dealing with, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I think the other interesting thing between the genders, which is often really popular, really common, again, like you say, not everybody, but women in general tend to have girlfriends or
Yeah.
sisters.
Yeah.
And there is a bond there that, again, lots of women haven't had this and have really suffered also, suffered that isolation. But when you have friends that you can sit and you can discuss things with and you can cry with and you can get angry with and you can drink wine with or you can do whatever with and really chew things up,
Mm.
even if you're struggling in relationship, it's almost like you've created this family of love in friendship. But so many men don't have that.
They
Like
don't.
so many men don't, like I'm always amazed, like even if I'm in relationship with someone and we're going through something, I've maybe talked to 12 people about it, and they
Yes.
haven't talked to anybody.
Yes.
except me.
How do they process without talking? That's what how does anybody process things without talking it through? I can't understand that. But you're absolutely right. And I think, there's a lot of men who haven't had that, it just hasn't been available to them. And, the traditional thing is we go to the pub and we talk about sports and we just have a laugh. And we, if your mum dies, like, oh, sorry, mate, it's bad to hear, whatever. But actually letting somebody in and really talking about the stuff. And until I think men hit a wall of some sort, maybe a parent dies, or maybe, a relationship hits the rocks, or, you have serious problems with the kids, or what, I don't know, whatever. Until something really hits a hard spot, they won't talk about it. But when they do, they realize that actually, oh, it's really good to talk. And guess what? So-and-so, who I've been mates with for 25 years or whatever, who I've always only ever talked about with sport to, actually, he's going to open up and we are actually going to have a really heartfelt conversation. Who knew? And they've had it. I don't believe it's not possible. I just believe they choose not to go there. And it's a bit of a game of chicken. It's like, who's going to go first? Who's actually going to open up their hearts first? Because I think most men are really happy to open their hearts. They just don't think they're allowed to.
Well, have you watched the show Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Oh, it's the Diamond Dogs,
Oh,
right?
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So if for anyone who's never watched it, it's the best show ever. Gotta watch it. So good, worth getting an Apple subscription for if you can't get it. But I'm like, I can't even get it. I just finished watching it, so I'm in Ted Lasso
Yes.
high.
Yeah, I feel you.
And he has this group of men, like basically like pulled out of this soccer team or football team, right? And there are all these coaches and people, and they're called the Diamond Dogs, where dudes get together and they're like, I've got an issue, and they call in the Diamond Dogs and they talk about it. Like, this is so earth-shattering for the world. Like,
It's
men all need Diamond Dogs.
yes, they really, really do. You're so right. And it's so beautiful. It's so heartwarming. And there's a program on the television here, in the UK. It's on the BBC, so you could probably get it wherever, because BBC is pretty worldwide. And it's called, oh God, what is it called? Mortimer and Whitehouse Go Fishing, Gone Fishing, it's called. And it's these two old comedians. They're old dudes. They're well loved. They've been around forever in the UK anyway. And they just pack up their fishing stuff and you follow them and they just go to a river or a lake and they just go fishing. But they talk about their emotions, they talk about their health, they talk about the big things. And it has been such a huge, for the good old British upper lip of men who don't talk, especially that generation, because they're, in their 60s. It's so heartwarming to watch. I have no interest in watching men fish, really, zero, zero,
What? That's
less
so
than
weird.
zero. But the endearing qualities of watching these two men actually be really intimate in their conversation and getting a bit teary and talking about the things that they've been through or going through. It's like, and it's not scripted. It's just them, their real lives. It's been such an inspiration, I think, to a lot of men to go,
Ooh,
actually, and everybody needs a mate like that to talk to. I could just go and sit on the river and just go, mate, it's a bit tough. Um,
right?
yeah,
Oh,
because
it's so
I
important.
think a man's, I think the reaction to close the heart for a man is quite an easy, it's an easy go to close the heart rather than open the
Totally.
heart. Much easier just to hold it all in. But that way, Pauliness lies, and we don't want that for anybody. Yeah. So, gosh, I don't know, see how long we've been chatting for. Way too long, as usual. 1:15. We've probably been talking for an hour now. So I'm just going to say thank you, Katrina. Like, I feel like this conversation about masculine and feminine could go on. I mean, it is such an important conversation. And I think that it's so interesting to separate out the issues of men and women versus the differences between masculine and feminine. And this is something that I really feel is such an important subject to discuss. So I want, I'm hoping that you guys, all listeners and watchers, go and have these conversations and get the opinions of what people, like you just ask somebody, so what do you think the difference between the masculine and the feminine is? And see what comes up. It's going to be fascinating conversation, whatever happens, right?
Totally. And what it's also interesting, the one thing, even the masculine and feminine, is to understand that both are strong, right? There's no, even that, even in the protector vulnerable, vulnerable isn't weak.
No,
Vulnerable is also strong.
it's
It,
very,
it takes huge strength to go into those dark corners. Like it's no small thing. And that's one of the big differences, because I would imagine a lot of people would say, well, the masculine is strong and the feminine is weak, and the masculine is angry and the feminine is loving. Like we have all these kind of weird ideas, and it's like, no, everybody's loving, everybody's strong. Now, how do we interact in ways that make us both bigger? Right? That's really the question.
yeah. So, well, if you want to go dive deeper, this is Katrina's beautiful book, Divine Union of the Masculine and Feminine by Katrina Boss. I highly recommend all Katrina's books, because you write in such a way that they're laid out in such an easy way to absorb, and you put it so beautifully and plainly, and your beautiful energy comes across so nicely. So yeah, I highly recommend all of Katrina's stuff and her courses. And of course, you're just katrinabos.com, aren't you?
Or
Boss.
.ca.
Oh, .ca, sorry, .ca, with just the one S. And I feel like this, we could break all laws of convention and go for a part 3 at some point in the future. I think, let's do a summertime one and maybe get our men on the I'm going to put it out there in this one just so that we're held accountable.
That would be so fun. Yeah, we
Yeah.
were talking about like doing a double date podcast and just
Yeah.
get it
Scary.
all. Then we're going to talk for 4 hours.
Yes,
The
exactly.
longest podcast ever.
Exactly. Oh, well, thank you, Katrina. Thanks so much for your time today. Absolutely loved this, as always. Thank you.
Thanks so much.